morning, Chairman.
Good morning. Welcome to the virtual meeting of the Review and Scrutiny Management Board. My name is Councillor Robert Parker and I'm the Chair of the Board. Welcome to all members and officers in attendance today. The audio feed of this meeting is being broadcast via the County Council's website, and I'd like also to welcome members of the press and public who are listening to our meeting online today. Anyone invited to speak during today's meeting should unmute their microphone and switch on a camera. Could you please turn off your camera and microphone when not participating? Bit of a change with regards to voting at today's meeting, as it's now possible for democratic services and some laptop users, including me, to see up to 49 people on the screen at once. This reduces the need for roll call voting. Therefore, for the minutes and the two pre-decision scrutiny reports, which are items 3, 7 and 8 on the agenda, what I'll be doing will be asking committee members to turn on their camera and all others present to turn their camera off. We can then use a show of hands so that it is visible on camera. The other items will still be decided by dissent, as we've done previously. If you wish to speak, can you use the chat function and type speak as a comment? All officers and members are welcome to use the chat function. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chair, Councillor Ray Wootton, Nigel West, Head of Democratic Services and Statutory Scrutiny Officer, will indicate in the chat when a new item has begun. If you experience any IT issues during the meeting, please end the call using the red phone icon and rejoin the meeting using the link previously provided. If you experience connectivity issues while speaking, please turn your camera off, as this may help. If you continue to experience IT issues, please contact Simon Firth, IT engineer, for assistance. Can I also ask that members who are intending to leave the meeting or are returning to the meeting, could you indicate using the chat function? Officers don't need to do so. Okay. Can we go to the meeting now, please? And can I start by asking Nick Harrison, Democratic Services Officer, to confirm the presence of all members in attendance at the meeting today?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ray Wootton. Councillor Adams. Councillor Adams.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Bocat.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Brockway.
Present.
Councillor Kendrick.
Present.
Councillor Macy.
Present.
Councillor Marfleet.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Newton.
Present.
Councillor Pepper.
Present.
Councillor Strangle.
Present.
And we have the added members, Mrs. Machin, Parent Governor Representative.
Present.
And also Miss Alex Sayer.
Present.
And Reverend Philip Johnson. And also we have councillors intending to attend today as Councillor Hill. Councillor Hill. Councillor Young. Councillor Young.
Present.
Councillor Boothroyd.
Present.
Councillor Whittington.
Present.
And we also have, listening as an observer, Councillor Corey.
Present.
That's it.
Right, well, thank you, Nick. Welcome, everybody. Okay, so we've moved to the agenda, and item 1, agenda, apologies for absence. Nick, do we have any apologies?
No apologies, Chairman.
Okay. Item 2 is declarations of councillors' interests. If any member would like to declare an interest, can you please indicate in the chat box now by typing speak? Okay, Councillor Watton, do we have any members who would like to declare an interest? Sorry, Councillor Watton, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, Chairman. None declared, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we move to item 3, minutes of the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee Board, held on the 27th of August. What we're doing here is confirming and for me to sign the minutes from the meeting of the board on that date as a correct record. Do I have a proposer or a seconder?
Chairman, happy to propose.
Thank you.
Second that, Chairman, as well.
That's kind of you. Thank you. So we'll vote on the minutes. Just a reminder, been through this many times, but you're voting on whether you agree that the minutes are a correct record. Can I ask all members of the board to turn on their cameras, please? Okay. Can all those in favour please raise their own hand, not the one on Teams, to indicate those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. So the result of the vote is that the minutes have been agreed. Can I ask you now to turn your cameras off and unmute until you're called to speak? Okay, so we're moving now to item 4, which is the announcements by the Chair, Executive Councillors and Chief Officers. I just want to say a few words. First, I attended the meeting of the Executive on the 2nd of September on behalf of the board and presented the comments from the board on the Revenue and Capital Budget Monitoring Report. In relation to the Capital Budget, the discussed at our meeting about whether there was further to try to limit spending on highway schemes through improvements to the forecasting of the cost of capital programme projects. In response, it was highlighted that work was in hand to manage pressures to improve and match profiling and smooth the capital financing costs. I'd also like to announce that it's been agreed by group leaders that Scrutiny Panel A, which is chaired by Councillor Linda Wotton, will undertake an urgent short review of developer contributions. The review will start in October and it's thought that it will be completed by Christmas. Once completed, the board will receive the outcomes from the scrutiny review. Okay, that's the end of my announcements. Can we move now to any executive councillor announcements from Councillor Hill or Councillor Whittingham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got nothing from the leader. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Young, Executive Councillor for Community Safety and People Management. Any contribution you would like to make to our OSMB meeting?
At this stage, only to say congratulations to everybody who has weathered the storm thus far. There's an awful lot going on, and I think you may be pleasantly surprised after this morning at just what is going on behind the scenes to ensure that we keep going.
Thank you for that. Very welcome. Moving to Chief Officer's announcements. Debbie, is there anything you might like to say, perhaps briefly, on an update on coronavirus and the way that we are, as a county council, handling it?
Thank you very much, Councillor Parker. Yes, Debbie Barnes, Chief Executive. So just really to give the committee a very brief update. So the numbers in Lincolnshire continue to be relatively low compared to other areas in the country. We are seeing an increase in numbers, which again is a pattern that is following the rest of the country, but from a much lower base. Therefore, we haven't got any areas that are in any lockdown, and the Local Outbreak Engagement Board has not had to take any action, which is clearly positive. Obviously, we've had some announcements from the Prime Minister, including the new test and trace payment that will be made, and we're working with the district councils because the district councils will be responsible for enforcing and implementing the new test and trace payment. Working very hard with the university because obviously over the next few weeks more of our students will be returning to the city of Lincoln because of the university returning, and obviously we're working very closely with Lincoln City and the university to support transition of those students that come back to university safely. and we will be increasing the availability of testing around that site so that there's more opportunities and easier access for students to be able to access a test if they need that. And obviously, in line with the Prime Minister's announcements, we have reinforced to our staff that if they can work from home, they should work from home. So that's the update I'd like to give. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you. That's really helpful. Okay, moving on. James Drury, Executive Director Commercial. Anything that you want to contribute to our meeting by way of an announcement?
No announcements from me, Councillor Parker. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks, James. Okay, if we move then to item 5, consideration of call-ins. Nick, are there any call-ins to consider?
There's no call-ins, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 6 is consideration of councillor calls for action. Again, Nick, have we received any councillor calls for action?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, we now move then to item 7, which is the first of the items that we've got to consider and deliberate on. This is the corporate plan performance framework, pre-decision scrutiny by the executive on the 6th of October. What we've got is Jasmine giving us a presentation on this report. We've also got Caroline Jackson in attendance for this item. If I could, just as a way of reminder, say that we are looking to pass on stuff to the executive. So in a sense, we need to be deliberated it in such a way that our outcomes are clear so that I can pass on to the executive what's expected. So we're considering the corporate plan performance and we're agreeing any additional comments that you want me to pass on to the executive. So, Jasmine.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. So yes, this is item 7. So, oops, excuse me while I just try and navigate the IT a little bit. So this is a corporate plan performance framework and it will be presented to the executive on the 6th of October. So again, as Councillor Parker said, the views of the board will be reported to the executive as part of their sort of consideration of this item. So I'm just trying to navigate through and keep on Teams as well, so just bear with me. So the performance framework is going to replace the council business plan reporting that OSMB and executive receive on a quarterly basis. And basically, what I'm asking our board to do is consider the paper in Appendix 1 that will go to the executive in relation to this item. So just moving on to page 18.1.12. Just to highlight an overview of the framework. So the framework will contain performance indicators, which are numerical ways of assessing performance, and also activities, which are a narrative way of expressing what we set out to do and achievement against that. So we've organised that framework around the 4 ambitions that are in the corporate plan, and members will be aware that the corporate plan was approved by the full council in December last year. So executive received an earlier version of what was then called the success framework in May and asked for some further work to be done. So the proposal, as detailed in point 1.14, is really that the council business plan will have, the corporate plan will have performance indicators and activities, and they will be reported on a quarterly basis to the executive and to OSMB. And that's what we're calling tier 1 of the framework. So that high level indicators and these narrative sort of activities. And then service level performance indicators will be reported to the various scrutiny committees by exception. And these are substantively really those performance indicators that were previously in the council business plan that were still relevant to report going forward. So members will be familiar with those. So what I've attached in Appendix A is a bit of a diagram just summarising what that framework will look like. So that's on page 23, just after page 23. So I want to just guide you through that, if I may. So just the points that I wanted to highlight there is that in terms of tier 1, Those activities, they will be RAG rated. I'll talk a little bit more about what that will mean. And then we'll have an explanation of the milestones against that activity. So this is what we set out to do. This is what we've done. And again, as I said, that will be reported to OSMB and the executive. And we want to start reporting that from Q2. But the data for our performance indicators will be collected for Q1 and for Q2. And then in terms of the tier 2, again, there's been a bit of a weeding out around what was in the council business plan. So executive directors have identified those performance indicators for reporting to the 6 scrutiny committees. Again, that reporting will be by exception, and that will begin to be reported after executive have approved this new performance framework on the 6th of October. So again, we'll be collecting that data for Q1 and for Q2. But just to be clear, we will cease reporting against the council business plan. And the new framework will then replace that. Go back here. So in Appendix B, I've just highlighted the Tier 1 PIs and activities. So you're probably familiar with those and have seen those because they were approved by the executive back in May. In terms of reporting the new performance framework, I'm just on point 1.22 on page 18 now. So highlight that I've explained sort of Tier 1 and where that gets reported. That will be reported. But it may be the case that actually the services may choose to report some or all of the performance indicators that are in Tier 1 because it may add context to the conversation when they're also reporting their service indicators. Now, where that's the case, we're asking that feedback is then comes from the relevant scrutiny committee back to OSMB, a bit similar in the way that that happens now, so that OSMB consider that and consider which comments might be appropriate to take forward to the executive. But really, we want to avoid the various scrutiny committees also scrutinising Tier 1 performance because we don't want to create that duplication because we've worked very hard to sort of not have that duplication in the existing framework. So that's just something that I wanted to flag up. There is that opportunity where it makes sense, but it isn't encouraged as a matter of course. So in point 1.2.3, what we envisage is that the Tier 2 performance, so all of those service performance indicators, along with the Tier 1, the indicators and the activities, will get reported to the various scrutiny committees, OSMB and the executive at around about the same time. But obviously that's dependent on the scheduling of the committee meeting, but that would be our aim. And then again, scrutiny committees can bring anything of interest or concern to OSMB, and then that can be filtered back up to the executive. So in the new framework, we'll continue to report by exception. And then again, for the performance indicators, as you'll be familiar, that'll be things that haven't achieved the target, maybe where things have achieved the target, but the direction of travel is a concern. But also where services want to celebrate success, where they've achieved a target. And then just moving on in terms of the activities, I just want to highlight that because that's a bit different to what we've been used to because the activities in terms of that narrative is new to this new framework. So in point 1.3.3, services have been asked to identify key milestones over the next 18 months for those activities, and then it's against those milestones that progress will be reported. So the report whether they were behind plan, and we want to do a simple colour coding, hence the RAG rating of red. So again, that means that I haven't achieved the current milestones, and that will be red. So we'll expect an explanation around that. I'll identify, and these will all be objective assessments by the lead officers. So on plan, that will be amber colour coded. And that will be that I've achieved the current milestones and I'm also forecasting that those milestones will be achieved in the future. Or green will be ahead of plan. So those milestones have been achieved ahead of plan and I'm also forecasting that I'll continue ahead of plan. So again, services will have the opportunity then to explain that performance and to celebrate success. So in terms of the look and feel of those performance reports, point 1.4, we're looking to you, we will be using Power BI to report in Tier 1. And I've just offered up in Appendix D a kind of look and feel of some early screenshots of what that would look like. It is still work in progress. We've evolved a little bit more since then, but it gives board an idea of the layout, if you like, of the information you will receive. In terms of the information received by the scrutiny committees, we'll still be using the existing LRO. And that's just in terms of logistics, because the bulk of those measures are already in the council business plan. They're already reported in that platform. But what I'm going to propose to do is just structure that reporting around those 6 scrutiny committees, so that you'll have ease of navigation, if you like. You go to the scrutiny committee that relates to your area of interest, and then we've identified some subheadings in Appendix E, just for ease of navigation, and those subheadings really relate to service areas. So going forward, our aim is really to use that Power BI reporting, so that look and feel of Tier 1 for all of that performance framework. So we'll be looking to do some work to develop that next year, with the aim of beginning to report that 2021-22. So that's it for me in terms of the end of the presentation around the new performance framework. Happy to take any questions if members have any.
Thank you. So, Jasmine, Appendix B sets out the 4 corporate priorities. Okay, and they're the ones that are coming to us under Tier 1. So they're the areas that we are particularly focusing on. Yeah. So, members of OSMB, if we start with page 25, I mean, there's the general thrust and there's the tone that Jasmine just explained about what we're trying to consider as an overview and scrutiny management board. But anybody want to raise any points about, for example, Appendix B update, support high aspirations versus enable everyone to join life to the full and all. So, Councillor Watson, anybody indicated to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Jackie Brockway is requested.
Yes, I wanted to speak, Chairman, but not about the point you've just raised. Do you want me to wait until you've finished that?
I finished. I'm now throwing it open to OSMB to talk about anything. Very much.
I wanted then, could I draw people's attention to page 18, please, the bottom paragraph, which is 1.2.2. This is to do with reporting, the difference between Tier 1 and Tier 2, and the choice that service areas will have on whether or not they report this to their scrutiny committee. I'm just a little bit concerned that there's a kind of looseness there, that, some will choose to report, some won't. And I know things will go to OSMB, but OSMB is one meeting. And, there's a lot to get through. And I'm just concerned that things we might need to see could slip aside if there is a free choice in service areas about what they do and do not report. Would somebody, for instance, who is very pleased with their work be more inclined to bring forward something who is under pressure and may not have quite finished? And if there isn't reporting going to go on in this area, we're not going to know difficulties that people might be facing. So can I have some reassurance there, please? Thank you.
Is it okay for me to come in? Yeah, sorry. So just to clarify, those scrutiny committees and services will be reporting regularly to their scrutiny committees. That point 1.2.2 was really about they may also choose to consider what's in Tier 1. So they might also think it's actually beneficial for us to consider the performance that the OSMB are seeing. But it's not that they can pick and choose what goes. They've already identified the indicators that they will be reporting on a quarterly basis. So there will be that consistency for those scrutiny committees. And I believe it's Appendix C where that lists all of those that they'll be seeing.
Okay, thank you very much. May I come back briefly, Chairman?
Of course you can, Jackie.
So what happens? They're still choosing whether or not to report Tier 1. Is that right?
That's right. Well, it might be that actually we're not encouraging it, but they might say, actually, do you know what? It's helpful to include some of those Tier 1s as well. But we just want to avoid that duplication. It might be that they just present what that performance is in terms of context.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Watson.
No further speakers at this stage, Chairman.
Okay. I've got a question in the sense of the if we take Appendix B, which is on page 25, it's about supporting high aspirations. And I'm just interested in knowing, and the same applies actually to other headings, how broad across the whole of the County Council we've drawn on particular I'm going to call criteria, like proportion of people in higher skilled jobs, is one example of supporting high aspirations. But have we considered across the whole of the number of directorates whether or not their work can be identified as supporting high aspirations? Because it is a broad theme, and that's why it was selected. So is enable everyone to enjoy life to the full. Now, both of those two, every directorate is contributing in some way towards that. And I just wondered how wide we'd cast our net when we'd be thinking about the particular criteria that have been put forward, because they seem to be restricted in number to about 8.
That's right. So if it's possible to come in. So there were workshops held right across the organisation, and they were mixed workshops around those organisations. So it wasn't that we said if it's high aspirations level, it's children's that feed in. So assistant directors were meeting, the CLT members of the exec directors were meeting, and they all fed into that, as did sort of heads of service. So it was council wide for each of those ambitions. And then there were filtered through.
And how was the process then decided? You know, because it wasn't just magically that each meeting, and I'm not trying to make a point, that every meeting came up with 8. Okay.
No, that's right. So then when those were identified, they were ultimately CLT that decided what those would be. I think Debbie may want to come in because she was closer to that process than I was. But yeah, everybody was able to feed in, as I say, across the organisation. And then ultimately there was a conversation that was had at that management level. But I think Debbie's going to probably come in and give you some more.
Yes, thanks, Jasmine. Thank you, Councillor Parker. It's really just to add to that. There's a sense of, I suppose, pragmatism as well, and I think that we recognise that this is the first year of a new corporate plan, and as we move forward, clearly we'll refine and we'll improve, and we're on a bit of a journey in terms of performance indicators. Clearly, there's a level of pragmatism in terms of what data is already captured and what data is already available. So some of the performance indicators are existing performance indicators. There is some new performance indicators in there, but again, we wanted to be realistic and pragmatic about the number of new performance indicators in terms of making sure that we are able to capture the data and it does tell us truly about outcomes. But I think that we will refine it as we move forward. Okay, so in a true sense, this is work in progress, and I mean that positively. Okay, so this is our first dipping of our toe in the water. Yeah, I mean, I do think that as we refresh it every year, it's right and proper that we consider whether these are the right performance indicators and what else we should be working towards. But absolutely, as Jasmine said, it was a combined effort across all of the assistant directors and the directors to make sure that there was that shared ownership, that everybody has got something to contribute to each of the aspirations. Okay. Right. Anybody else? No. Okay.
Is Caroline? I'm not sure the surname wants to speak.
Caroline Jackson, Chairman.
Oh, right.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Caroline Jackson. I'm interim head of corporate performance.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi. I think the other thing I would add to that is, when we were developing the performance framework, it was very much acknowledged that there is a significant amount of business as usual activity that goes on across the organisation around these aspirations, and the framework sought to identify really the development work and the work that was going to take us further forward, and I think very much so in terms of there is a significant amount of business as usual that is not captured obviously in the framework, because it would probably be 100 pages long. So just to acknowledge the context in which the framework was developed.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I raised the question of flexibility. The reason I make that point is that when we look at the support high aspirations, half roughly of the criteria are once-a-year criteria. Okay, not capable of being reported quarterly, because the achievement level at Key Stage 2, Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5, number of pupils within the HCP placed in mainstream schools, that may be different, but they're once a year. it may be that that we want to be monitoring support high aspirations in a way that gives us a feel every quarter. But that's just a point that I'm making now. Okay. So we move to the vote then. Okay, the voting procedure. Yeah. So could we have those in favour of the recommendations that we've now got? The first one of which is about making any is supporting it, and then to make any comments. We've got a comment that Jackie made. We've got a comment also that I've made. Jackie, I think you've just raised your hand. Jackie, you need to unmute your microphone.
I'm sorry, Chairman. I thought you were calling for a show of hands. Sorry.
Right, so you don't want to speak. Okay, so those in favour, please raise their hands. Nick?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. That's good. Okay. We move back to the agenda. Jasmine, still item 8, performance reporting about the now passed by Council Business Plan Q4 for 2019-2020. Last time you'll be giving this sort of report, Jasmine.
Indeed, yes. So this is, as you just mentioned, Councillor Parker, the final report for the Council Business Plan for Q4. So in the report, I've just highlighted those measures that come in the remit of OSMB, specifically in the remit of OSMB on page 39, that begins here, and then attached the report that will go to the Executive and be discussed by the Executive on the 6th of October. So in terms of those measures that specifically come within the remit of this board, all that could be compared with the target in Q4 achieved that target, with the exception of one, which is the Public Services Network connection compliance. And I've just included in there the kind of reasons for that today in reapplying, as well as one required condition. But also the service did want to highlight that actually the PSN is just one of a number of standards that we're trying to do. And the IT environment is in fact achieving a very high standard required by the ISO 7001, which is around our information security standard. And then just to highlight in terms of employee turnover and sickness, as I reported in Q3, just due to the sort of work that's being done in terms of producing those reports at the moment, we're not able to report currently. Although that data is available for Q4, it's reported with a 1 quarter lag, so we would expect to report that in Q1. Again, that was nothing new. Board are aware of that work that is taking place around the business world system. So moving on to the report to the Executive, which is in Appendix 1, and I'll just highlight any key points there. So moving on to page 43 then, just to explain the Q4 performance, you'd usually see that in June and it would go to the Executive in early July. But because of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, that report's been deferred, and that's why you're seeing it later than you would normally have seen it. So in terms of the headlines of that performance, point 2, I've just highlighted that in terms of those 17 commissioning strategies, we were doing really well, because 9 actually achieved all of those measures, achieved the target for 9 of those commissioning strategies. 4 performed really well, where there was just 1 measure that didn't achieve the target, and 3 had mixed performance, and 1 didn't achieve any of those targets. So those 17 commissioning strategies for Q4 related to 60 measures, and 78% of those achieved the target. But what I thought was interesting is of those 13 that didn't achieve the target, just to consider the impact of COVID-19 and what that's had, not only on performance, but also in some instances about being able to obtain the data. So for 5 of those, as you can see, around trading standards, visits to libraries, jobs created, external funding, attract Lincolnshire, COVID-19 all had an impact on that performance. there are about 4 indicators that where COVID isn't showing an impact on that performance. That's in point 2.4, but that's really because they're reported with a lag, and so that impact hadn't shown in quarter 4 at the point of reporting in quarter 4. In terms of 2.5, then it was just interesting to see where COVID-19 had an impact in terms of being able to report. So concluded inquiries where the desired outcomes were achieved. You'll recall that actually was an audit going to be undertaken just to understand the reasons for those few cases where it didn't meet the outcome, just to see if they could identify any themes or patterns. But that ongoing audit was put on pause because that was at the start of the onset of the pandemic. They do expect the results to be reported in quarter 1. And then, as I've mentioned, in terms of data not being available, so where we're working with partners, LPFT, for example, around adults with mental health problems living independently, LPFT understandably have been prioritising work around COVID-19, so haven't been able to provide that information. But also in terms of adult care and the national SALT returns, those deadlines for reporting were extended due to COVID-19, so we weren't able to have that information at the time of writing this report. So again, I've just highlighted those things. And again, where we've had to do a paper survey, then input analysis was delayed due to the COVID pandemic as resources were kind of shifted and moved around. But the other thing to note is in quarter 4, as always, that adult care data is provisional, and it is still provisional, and that's really just consequences of those timescales being delayed due to the submission of those statutory returns. And then, as usual, in 2.9, we highlight success where we've achieved well, and all of that is highlighted in Appendix A, and I've just listed the various commissioning strategies that have performed well or really well. And then the ones where we haven't achieved the target, and we've got mixed performance, and they're highlighted in Appendix B. So that's the end of the presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Sure. Just in relation to one point, you know where you said information is not yet available, because this is the final report, we would be expecting to get that information at some point. Could you arrange for that to be circulated to members of OSMB? Yes, when it does come in?
Yeah.
Okay. So members of OSMB are on all sorts of scrutiny committees and chairs of many. So is there any, who wants to raise any points or bring matters to our attention, ask questions in relation to this report? Councillor Watson, have we got any speakers?
None so far, Chairman.
Right. Okay. So in relation to the questions that were raised about the 9 perform really well, sorry, in relation to what you said about 9 perform really well, these will be clearly conveyed by myself to the executive, as will the form performed well. The mixed performances, any messages anybody wants me to pass on to the executive about? I know this is the last report that we're going to be presenting, but the 3 that got mixed messages, anybody want to raise any points about that? No. 1 didn't achieve the target, which Jasmine mentioned, but if we haven't got anything that we want to add to this, then we move straight to the recommendation that we're providing. The executive notes, sorry, the executive will be asked to note and consider. We've considered the attached report. Do we want to make any additional comments to be passed on to the executive? So, those in favour? I know we're considering the attached report and whether we do support the recommendations, but any additional comments?
Chairman. The proposer, Chairman.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to get whether we agree any additional comments and whether I'm giving a final opportunity for people to say whether there's any additional comments.
Job well done, Chairman.
Chairman, this is Jackie.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, just an opportunity I was thinking about on page 44 about the removal of unsafe products from the market. It did occur to me that when we're talking about unsafe products and high-risk premises, we have actually an opportunity, a different opportunity, where premises are now unsafe in a different way, with crowding and people not observing COVID regulations and things. And I did wonder if that's an area that might fall under our remit during the COVID situation, different from our normal inspections. Is it something we might just want to think of? Thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
Chairman, I have one speaker now, Councillor Rob Kendrick.
Councillor Kendrick. Rob.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm trying to recall from reading through the papers, there was one of the poor performances which always comes up is to do with, I think it's people with drug and alcohol issues and missing targets for people not returning with that problem. I mean, I've always commented on this one that it's one of those things that you have very great difficulty in achieving, because it comes down to individuals' willingness to participate in the scheme and to benefit from the scheme. So I accept that's an ongoing issue, really. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Jasmine, you want to pick up on that at all?
No, and they do work very hard in that contract to sort of try and achieve that in difficult circumstances. I mean, one of the options could be actually, is it just measured and we don't compare it to a target? But we do, and it's managed quite closely within that contract. But you're quite right. The people have got quite complex needs, and it's not as straightforward as some other things in terms of that trajectory to achieving the target.
Okay. Right. Mover and a seconder for the consider the attached report and whether we support the recommendations. Agree any additional comments, some of which have been captured. So, who is there a mover and a seconder?
Move it, Chairman.
Happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you. So it's moved by Councillor Brockway and seconded by Councillor Wotton. Could all members indicate their vote on this? Those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick, and thanks everybody for voting. If we then move on to item 9. Future reporting of the IMT services. Report from John Wickens, pages 73 to 116.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Wickens, the Assistant Director for IMT. Referring to the title of this report, Future Reporting of IMT Services, and subsequent to a meeting with Councillor Parker and Councillor Wotton, it was decided that IMT would move to a quarterly reporting pattern. And at 3 of those 4 events, we would bring 2 types of reports. And in that way, the goal is to improve or make more holistic the oversight of the IMT service, whereas historically the emphasis has been on a couple of areas. Councillor Parker was very keen that we included an element of a less dry, less statistical sort of playback portfolio that related to the way those things were presented in the original strategy documents that are prepared. The first of the reports attempts to do that. I will not read the page numbers purely so that you can relate to the content of the attachment. I'll present this first part. The second part is a report you've seen before, which is indeed on this occasion that report of the portfolio. The projects in flight in real time, and many projects that are in fact commissioned by the business rather than driven by the IMT. So moving to page 78, to explain the document, and if you have a strong sense of déjà vu, it is purely that we chose the simple but I hope very transparent mechanism of using the original strategy document of 2019-2022 but inserted comments which intend to give a dialogue on how that plan has actually been affected in the intervening period. I hope that gives you an extremely transparent view, in fact, of you know, how we did against what we were saying back in 2019. The introduction gives a little information on how the IMT service is made up, and there's an inserted comment making reference to the fact that we have in fact added 2 new types of roles, which I'll explain further towards the end of this. Systems advisors, and they speak to the desire to increasingly create an enabling service. That point crops up again later, so I'll say a few more words on that in a moment. At the time, we were reporting that the trend in terms of service desk operation was an improving one. Tickets were being turned around in a more timely fashion. Of course, a lot of time has elapsed since then, and very particularly in the last 6 months or so, the support functions have come under significant pressure due to the effects of COVID. Which for us very much takes the form of the working from home directive. When the support desk comes under pressure, it tends to have knock-on effects to some technical operations and compromises the timeliness of certain activities as technical resources are stretched in many directions. That is especially true when a condition persists for many weeks, and indeed now we're into many months. And the pressure for us is principally caused historically by some technical gremlins we've had with the remote access solution. We are hopeful and positive that we are making progress with that, and work continues as I speak with technical specialists working on that point. However, we feel any relief will be temporary, because then we will be getting into the end-use compute end of Office 365, and by nature of that kind of work affecting a great many devices and a great many people, we expect the pressure on the support desk to carry on for some months yet. Page 81 starts to flesh out in terms of essentially lists the projects that formed the plan that underpinned the strategy as a whole. I will sort of whiz through those very briefly, describing what they are, and sort of summarise more holistically towards the end. So from page 78, we start to describe the projects that we had in flight or were planning during this strategic period. Again, those of you looking in cover, those inserted comments you have the benefit of seeing those in orange. Well, those are the inserted comments, which are a dialogue on the individual projects. We had to do some work on the identity service. This was a prerequisite to adopting some of the Microsoft cloud services, and those are the technologies that prove who people are and establish their identity, but allows that to travel outside the organisation to consume resources that sit elsewhere without constantly being asked to re-authenticate yourself or remember multiple passwords and so on and so forth. The Dmarc Project, an email security project, which was required to achieve compliance with a directive from central government that all public organisations should adopt Dmarc compliance, which is our sort of an anti-spoofing technology. Web access modernisation was a project to improve the security of our network through those risks that are called browser-borne. So those risks that stem from the activity of people using the internet, typically with internet browsers. The Telephone Enablement Project, which was a software upgrade project to extend the sunk investment in our Avaya telephony system, but more pressingly, we were having severe stability issues with the contact centre, and the upgrade is part of the solution to the lack of stability that we're experiencing to quite bad effect at that period of time. Indeed, a number of serious outages were felt in early 2019 within the contact centre. LFR, a project to rather quickly replace an aging BT telephone exchange, which they used uniquely. It was part of the 999 infrastructure and became a critical piece of work. And the plan was to shift them over to the corporate telephony system just to further leverage that, that same investment. A project called Lincoln Campus Network, which was to replace obsolete hardware within our network infrastructure, again driven by severe stability issues and indeed some prolonged outages caused by the failure of critical equipment and also some of the resilience technologies themselves, which meant the organisation was taken down on one occasion for a number of days. A project to upgrade the internet connection to 10 gigabyte and at the same time migrate from the then obsolete N3 National Health Service network within time so that we could connect to the Health and Social Care network, its replacement, so that critical services in the council could continue. Crown House network upgrade. Again, we were getting performance issues reports from Crown House, and there was a project planned to rectify those performance issues. IMP migration, which is the central document repository used by the council, a project to move that from on-premises infrastructure into a much more stable cloud platform. Again, another platform with severe stability issues and repeated failures. A Windows 10 corporate refresh, which was combined with a device refresh. So that was moving from Windows 7 as the corporate desktop operating system, driven by security requirements. And as I say, very closely joined to the project that also replaced the hardware devices themselves. A digital platform, better known as the LCC corporate website. A project to migrate the content that was still relevant of the old website and light up a new website with a new look and feel. Corporate card payments, a long overdue project to provide chip and PIN and indeed now contactless payment services, and initially focusing very much on registrar service. I apologise for the length of this, but it was a very busy strategy. And indeed, the projects continue to be detailed under a different characterisation. Those projects I've just read out were characterised as modernisation projects, and the optimisation characterisation was given to some additional projects that include the a cluster of projects around LFR, which was to support the Sleaford new fire station build and combined site build. To move their control room to Nettleham, and then subsequent to that to assist in the LFR South Park build project. All those were not essentially IMT projects, but had significant IMT content, perhaps with the exception of the control centre move, which was a particularly difficult technical piece to complete. The Office 365 project was planned, and indeed it contains many components, some of which have been delivered and some of which are still in flight. Of that rather large portfolio of work, I think if we total that up, we have something like 17 major projects. The strategy only listed the major projects that were either mitigating significant corporate risk or were delivering strategic benefit or other significant effects on the council. There were, of course, a much higher number of projects in flight at any one time and have been delivered. But of that list of projects, 17 have been delivered. 2 were cancelled, 2 are still in flight, and 1 has been deferred. a significant workload was delivered in that period. In the summary section, which sit at around page 91, there's some dialogue there that talks about the future changes to our service design that will be required as these technologies start to take effect, and there's a comment to the effect that we are really now turning our attention to those service design changes. I mentioned the assistant roles that we've put into the IMT service as our first step towards building that enabling service. It's important to remember that the historical design of the service has been one of break fix and project delivery, with very limited resources made available to the business and its business managers to help them exploit, adopt, and optimize their use of technologies. But as we increasingly drop technologies which are quite change, enable strategic change and support optimization and business change, people will need assistance to get the best out of those technologies so that we fully exploit the opportunities of those and justify to the fullest extent the investment we've made in those technologies. We will also, aligned to that, acquire some technologies that will allow us to develop solutions for the first time in-house again after not doing so for a great many years. The reason for that is that these development capabilities are low complexity, low or no code in terms of software development. They're accessible technologies that will allow internal development of solutions to be delivered on an agile basis to quickly deliver business value and meet business need on an iterative basis. This is a new problem, a new service is required to meet that need, but we will do that on a modest evolutionary basis, initially built around the Office 365 push. Finally, as we are essentially have finished somewhat earlier than planned the 1922 strategy, all bar the 2 in-flight projects that I mentioned, it also feels timely now to look at starting to draft the next IMT strategy. We, of course, revise the plan much more frequently. Many projects go through the system, which you see in the kind of report that follows this. But we feel it's time now to propose to the council a high-level strategy document, and our objective is to get that into the council's consideration in the new year, and we're just commencing drafting the contents of that strategy now. It's important to note that the more transformational elements that were talked about in the 2019 strategy are now fundamentally being delivered, working very much as part of the transformation program, the corporate transformation program. And in fact, the document tries to explain back then that transformation is not something IM can do to any organisation. It has to work in partnership with any organisation to change itself. And the transformation program has been established by CLT to create a vehicle through which these things can happen. And again, those things will ask questions of the IMT service, and that forms part of some of the service design that you will see in the next strategy document. Before we move on to the classic portfolio reporting, I think it would be a good time to stop and answer any questions that the board have. Chairman.
Indeed. Thank you for that, John. Really good. Ray, Councillor Wootton, have we got speakers?
Just one, Chairman, Councillor Jackie Brockway.
Lovely. Councillor Brockway, Jackie.
Thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, can I say thank you for this report? I've really enjoyed reading it, and I found the way you've laid it out extremely helpful, particularly the orange boxes. So thank you very much for that. Earlier, I just wanted to give you feedback rather than a question. Earlier on, you talked about improvements, and I would like to say that I would very much support that. I've certainly, my own personal usage and experience has improved tremendously. and it's made a big difference to my ability to do my job. And I would like to particularly draw the committee's attention to the extremely kind and supportive work done by Simon Firth, often at hospitable hours. So I think it's always good to put praise where praise is due. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wotton, next speaker.
No further speakers at this time, Chairman.
Okay, while people are thinking, perhaps I could introduce a couple of questions. Thank you, John, for all the work you and I and Councillor Wotton and your team have done. The first question I wanted to ask is, if we go to page 81, which sets out the priority areas for the Council's IMT service, three of them, ABC, address known recurring high-impact service issues, deliver high-performing and reliable IMT services, empower staff to exploit the full value of IMT. Great. Totally agree. How do we translate those three priorities into measurable targets? Okay, so that's what I'm interested in, because we're an overview and we're also a scrutiny committee. So I think we'll accept completely that modernisation agenda with those three priority areas. I'm interested in knowing how we then translate that into the 3-monthly report that we get, telling us this is how we did in the last 3 months.
Under the proposed the new reporting arrangements, you will see a report that covers more holistically service delivery. So within the reporting of statistical information that shows downtime on key systems, the availability of key systems, you'll have a more anecdotal report that isn't so much built around contractual KPIs and SLAs, but is basically a dialogue which speaks to the issues and problems that we've experienced in the intervening period. So a major platform outage would be explained as far as we knew at that point of reporting, what had caused it, and so on. So we have both a statistical measure of the availability of all our systems, which addresses point A. So which speaks to really the stability and the availability of our systems. In terms of the broader services, which is not just the availability of the technology platforms, software platforms and business applications and so forth, is how is the break fix service performing? I think that is well reported even historically, because you see the SLAs and KPIs around contract performance in that way. The more challenging part is the last one, which is, how do you measure if you have effectively empowered an organisation to exploit technology? I think we have to go for some softer measurement techniques around user surveys. But we can also apply some attempts and methodologies around things like digital scorecards. So as people start to adopt technology within their business processes, we try and track the move away from rather sort of manual or informal processes to more formal processes that have a digital basis. So number 3 is the more challenging one of those, and I don't really have a complete answer to that yet. It will evolve as the transformation programme increasingly changes those things.
I quite agree. Could I just pick up that point? I've got a couple more questions, but that last point about empowering staff to exploit the full value. If we improve the quality and the capacity of our IT systems, and this is not a negative statement, staff continue to work in the old way that they were doing, even though they're now capable through the equipment and the services, IT services we've got, then we've not made a lot of progress. And that's a wider point that I'd be interested in the CX commenting on, because across the whole of the county council's world, IT services, as they develop, have got to take staff with them so that the staff can utilise and exploit, if that's the right word, the full value of those services. So that's a senior leadership team issue, isn't it? Yep. Debbie, James.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, do you want me to come in on that?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, thank you. you're absolutely right. You know, you can upgrade the IT, you can make it reliable, you can demonstrate that there are all sort of clever capabilities that brings. If we choose as an organisation to continue to work in the way we always have done, then we won't be seeing the advantage of that. So I completely agree with your point, Chair. That's the reason I think why the transformation programme is there, looking at a one council approach, looking at where we can, where possible, and I appreciate we're a really diverse organisation, but where we can simplify and standardise processes across the council, where we can look through business process redesign to understand what we currently do and what now the technology enables us to do. And I think despite all the downsides of COVID, one of the pluses, if you like, is that we're starting to see innovation happening partly due to IT and partly sometimes independently of IT, because people need to work differently to deliver the right outcomes despite the pressures we face. So the transformation programme will harness some of that activity, and there is a business process review part within that where we'll be looking at how we can enhance, develop, improve, standardise, simplify those processes. And IT will be a really important factor that we'll need to use. And it's becoming, it's a bit of a phrase, but it's IT as an enabler of the organisation, as opposed to perhaps in the past being seen almost as a barrier. And that's the shift that we need to be making. So we're completely aware of that. And we're looking at what performance indicators we can build into the transformation programme as well. That will probably assist John and yourselves and board for that last point.
That's really reassuring. Thank you. John, yeah, you want to come back?
A very brief addition to that. I can also assure you, I think, without fear of contradiction, that one of the tests that we kind of use for new technologies that are very business visible are that the ones that are really successful, people vote with their feet. Good technologies, people vote with their feet. They start to exploit it because it makes their job easier, their life easier, or some aspect of their existence more convenient. And that's often the best litmus test of a successful delivery.
Okay. Can I pause here and say, does anybody else want to pick up on this general theme? Yeah, was anybody indicating, Ray?
No one's, Chairman, sorry.
Okay. Could I move on to the end period, this 2019 to 2022 IMT strategy? And I think you said, John, that we will be expecting something back within the wider council early in the new year. I'm just interested in just a bit more about that, and the sense that if we've got what we might call a project that's running from 2019 to 22, why it's not developing iteratively, so that we know, rather than feel as though we've done our piece up to 2020 and we'll now look at 2020 to 2022, why it isn't all merged into one evolutionary approach.
At an operational level, it is. There are many more projects than the ones listed in the strategy document. As I said, a collection of smaller work, but sometimes equally important, sometimes much less business visible, but equally important, and sometimes detailed security work, which we deliberately don't publish. So the strategy does evolve, and it is a core function of the strategic ownership of the strategy within LCC. But the work of drawing these things up and reporting them formally is, of course, yet another thing to do. And so what we try and do is review the strategy annually. It was late because we were coming out of that period that became known as the Fix the Basics just over the Christmas period. The team had been working extraordinarily hard for quite some protracted period of time, and before we really got a chance for people to take annual leave and rest the team somewhat, we got hit by COVID. So it's been an exceptionally demanding 2.5 years now, and I honestly don't think we would have had the resource to go back and do all the work that really sort of copper bottoms a strategy document to the quality and standard that it requires when it becomes a public document. But we completely accept that having completed such a high percentage of the existing strategy, it is now time to go to the council and seek approval for the next strategic phase, so the next 3 years or so. Also, we have that need to align with the contractual date. So as we approach 2024 and the need to make some fundamental changes to the IMT service by virtue of that fact, it's important that the strategy is in step with that requirement as well.
Okay. The next point was about the 4-year delay. Sorry
to interrupt. James has indicated he'd like to speak.
Fine.
Before we move on to the point.
Do you want to come back?
Thank you, Councillor Watton. Thank you, Chair. Yes, please. Just to say on that, I think, in simple language, if you like, the vast majority of that strategy has now been delivered. So although the dates ran through to 2022, because a number of things have been accelerated, a lot of that's been delivered, and also the context has now changed. So as John rightly said, the big focus was on fixing the basics, and I'm not going to stand here and say everything's perfect now, because we know it isn't, but fundamentally most of that work has now been successfully completed, and it just feels like the right opportunity, linked to the transformation programme as well, of how we now launch the next strategy that probably looks at things in a different way to where we did. So before it was really focused on recovering really and getting things in place. This is now taking it a real step change in how we deliver our IT and what it can provide for our organisation. So I think that's why we want to feel it's right now to launch a revised strategy. And as John said, we'll be looking early in the new year to come to through council processes with drafts of that for steer, views and recommendations.
Okay. Councillor Watton, is anyone else looking to speak?
Chairman, that's all the speakers so far. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to pick up on page 85, which is to do with the delay that we had for a long period of time. Okay. And we talk about the pre-existing project, a digital platform, being delayed over this long period of time. I'm just interested, and this isn't about harping on about history, but the lessons learned. Are we going to review? How did we get ourselves into a situation where we were looking at a project that went on for 4 years? To what extent has there been an internal investigation, inquiry, look at with lessons learned? Just tell me something about that.
Certainly at a department level, we had to do a lot of sort of self-inspection, I guess, as we went into 2019. It's timed at about the same time I became responsible for the IMT department, the IMT service. And we had to look at what were the sort of root causes of these problems, and they were mostly essentially of a strategic commercial basis. The way in which we had tried to procure both a service provider, a break-fix service, but also to package in there a complex package of transformational projects, expecting one organisation to have that extraordinarily broad set of capabilities and to achieve everything on a extremely condensed timeline, which then became problematic. And I was once asked, how does a programme, fall 4 years behind? And having worked in many organisations in quite a lot of countries, I can tell you it happens one day at a time. It's a creeping, corrosive process where you lose your timelines, you fight forward, you keep you try to make something work when some of the fundamental ideas underpinning it are not the correct ideas. And we had to make some quite brave, difficult decisions. We needed the support of the leadership of the council to do some of that. It meant cancelling outstanding commitments and projects, replacing those with more specialist providers when that was appropriate. Serco have since we've worked with Serco to improve with them their services and their fundamental capabilities, but also took a much more pragmatic approach to the delivery of projects. So it's a very complicated question to answer. I feel at a departmental level, we have now played back some of those realities because I think they've stopped being theories, and where we've proved by demonstration that if we change these things, we can get different outcomes. And they are being fed into the programme that is now considering the replacement contracts that we need in 2024. So I am very confident those lessons are being put to good use inside the council.
Okay. Right. Any further questions?
No, none, Chairman.
Okay, so we have had a discussion. If nobody else wants to speak, the next area I think is to do with the Serco contract. Many of us have been around for a long time on Value for Money Committee and now at SMB reviewing the Serco contract since it started. And we've seen significant improvements. That report that's captured on page 104 looks at the current position, and we can see that under paragraphs 3 and 4, certainly paragraph 3, serious, consistent good performance, and much the same with the red amber status numbers being very small. So yes, we can see good performance. We've now got an appendix which goes with it, looking at specific projects. I wonder whether you think that we do need to monitor a contract, obviously, clearly, because we are paying money to Serco for them to perform. My question to you, John and James, is whether or not the way that we're doing it at the moment, that monitoring role, do you feel it's still fit for purpose?
The IMT service is quite complicated, I guess, insofar as it contains a number of different concepts. So the part that works well, I feel, in terms of demonstrating that the contract is being delivered effectively, is that part of the service which is sort of paid for by the core contractual charges. So the break-fix service and some elements of capability that sit there that we can have a project delivery capability. Whereas then in reality, each project we commission is in effect a sort of new contract. So projects are delivery of projects are managed on an individual basis. It is still true Serco deliver by far the bigger proportion by number of those projects, and through careful commissioning, making sure we're commissioning projects that can succeed, that the resources required to succeed exist within our support organisation, and so on and so forth. We are achieving much better outcomes, and the very concerted efforts that Serco have made over the last 2 years, all that has come together to be part of a changing picture. It's not the whole story. There is some work is delivered outside of those arrangements. Things like the website, card payments, more latterly Microsoft Teams were done in a different way with different organisations. But that hybrid capability is important. But answering your question specifically, so the report that I'm going to ask Donna to present in a minute is really an overarching view of how Serco are delivering those projects that they're handling on behalf of the council. A different report that you're also familiar with plays back the SLAs and KPIs of that standing service, the break-fix service, which forms, the core of the contract. And indeed, then we intend to add visibility into then the user's perception of the IMT service, which is a somewhat different measure, and indeed start to give visibility on the data services activities that happen inside the IMT service, which historically are a reasonably new service and historically haven't been reported at all. So does that answer your question, Chairman?
After Donna's given the presentation, we can have another think about that, can we? Donna, it's Donna next then.
That's correct, yes. So Donna will, working in the pack from page 103, Donna will take us through the current portfolio of projects.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Chairman. Morning all. Donna Fryer, Head of Portfolio and Resources, part of IMT. Just a quick, I'll keep it quite brief, run through. This is a report that we have provided on a number of occasions. It gives you a bit of an update from the period from March when we last came to report to you. Obviously, the world has changed quite a lot in that time. So actually, some of the projects which were in flight at that time were impacted by COVID in some way, shape or form, whether that was to do with access to buildings, etc. However, it does also demonstrate actually that IMT was able to react along with our partners at Serco and, as John alluded to, using some other partners as well to support the initiatives of home working and a number of other activities that we needed to support through the COVID situation. I guess the most key one, which has kind of been mentioned, is through the 365. We did expedite getting teams out there. So whilst it was planned for this summer, we did bring that live at the very beginning of April. So it was a really quick turnaround, and you know, thanks to our partners for helping us do that. Just looking at the KPIs, I think I reported in here that it wasn't decided at that time. It has now settled on 87.5. So whilst that was a slight drop, it actually is still a green KPI, and you know, under the circumstances, you know, that it could have been a worse picture, as we're slowly getting back to grips with a BAU project delivery. The other thing that you may notice is that the number of projects which has been reported on here is a little bit down from last time. So we closed some at the last period. Those ones haven't been replaced because actually the commissioning of new projects has obviously been impacted by COVID, but we are now getting back up to speed with that, and actually you know, some normality is returning in that space. So actually that number will no doubt be back to a normal level to report for the next period. I think, you know, generally it's a positive picture. You know, we are moving forward with the projects and obviously contributing to the strategy delivery, which was obviously talked through in Appendix A, and you know, it continues to be a service which is delivering. So yes, it's a positive picture.
Sure. Okay. Right. Anybody want to raise any further points? Councillor Watson, have we got any? Councillor Watson?
Chairman, it's Nigel West here. There's none showing in the chat function.
Okay. So to go back to the report itself, we were given a list, weren't we, on, excuse me, page 73. Yeah, page 73. Seek reassurance about the performance of the IMT service in delivering the IMT strategy and the performance of key projects. I think we've gained assurance. Secondly, review the IMT strategy retrospective review report in Appendix A. We've done that. And we've also mentioned about the continuation, which has been promised for the rest of the period up to 2022. Review the key IMT related projects being undertaken by Serco. We've heard from Donna. Just final opportunity for anybody to comment on those key projects. If not, provide feedback and challenge as required. I think that there's been certainly some detailed analysis given to us by John and some challenge as required. So Do we accept the report together with the comments that I've just made? Those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much, and thank you, John and Donna. And I'm sure we'll see you back again to talk more about the future development of our IMT services. Thank you. Right, if we move on to to item 10, which is on page 117, Lucy's going to give a HR management information and workforce plan update. Over to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Lucy Shevell. I'm the Strategic HR Business Partner. So starting on page 117, this report covers a summary of the Q4 HR management information and corporate workforce initiatives, and also a data appendix at page 127. The Q4 period ran from January to March 2020. Please note that the reporting shows gaps in the data available due to the rebuild of both the organisational structure and reporting in the Business World ERP system. So looking at staffing levels, the data shows a minor increase in previously reported numbers of employments, but this is slowing down. This is a slowing down of increases which have been previously reported. There's been an increase in the numbers of people resourced through agencies to provide short-term cover for vacancies or absences and to support peaks in workload and specialist skills requirements. Although agency remains one of a number of resourcing methods open to our managers, it's important to ensure that this is used in appropriate circumstances and is reviewed where there's longer-term need for the stability of both the services and the workers. HR are therefore supporting CLT and directorate leadership teams to review and reduce their agency spend where appropriate. This includes offering employment contracts, developing current staff, and new recruitment campaigns. Recent increases include provision of adult care level 2 social workers and higher demands on staff, which has meant additional adult mental health professionals were needed and additional resources were required to support children's residential care. Educational psychology services are currently being delivered entirely through agency, pending arrangements for alternative service delivery, but I understand that the cost of that is within planned budgets. Estimates based on agency usage of Q1 in this year and the work that's already been done to reduce the number of agency workers suggest that this year's spend against our agency contracts will have reduced back to the level of the previous year. So looking at voluntary turnover and leavers information, within Q4, the number of voluntary leavers has not changed significantly. However, following a request from the last meeting where HR data was shared, this report provides additional information on the reason for leaving recorded by line managers against these cases. As you'll see on page 119 of the pack, reasons vary from other employment, education, and retirements. The largest reason is recorded see personal file. This is selected by the line managers completing the leaver forms when the detail of the resignation isn't clear or doesn't fit easily into one of the other categories and is outlined in the individual's resignation letter. The report also includes a summary of information we've received from exit surveys. These are completed voluntarily and can be done independently or with a manager or HR advisor present. The majority of responses show positive experiences, but they also provide insight into where improvements can be made. Any issues of concern are raised with the appropriate senior managers. So moving on to sickness absence, we're not able to report the days lost per FTE of sickness figure for Q4 due to the BW reporting and structure changes. However, the data shown at the bottom of 128 in your pack shows the number of days attributed to ongoing absences against the 4 main categories of absence in the graph. So the 4 categories that we use are, or that we summarise the data in, are all other reasons, which includes cancer and surgery-related absence, mental health-related absences, including stress, anxiety and depression, musculoskeletal, which are back and joint issues, and the cold, flu and viruses. There was an increase in cold and flu in Q4, which is to be expected due to seasonal variations. However, there was a significant increase in days attributed to mental health absence and the all other reasons category. Over a year, the number of mental health related absences has increased. The actual number of absences has increased from 101 in Q4 2018 to 167 in this Q4 we're reporting. But the number of actual days attributed to these absences has increased at a greater rate, showing that where staff have been absent for mental health related reasons, they have taken longer to return to work. They're generally longer term absences. Awareness of and openness about mental health issues remains a priority as part of the joint health and wellbeing strategy. And there has been a particular focus during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in the report on page 121, you can see the range of support mechanisms we have in place to support our staff, from self-help materials and training to talking therapies. We are continuing to monitor the health of our employees, and a recent survey about working from home, this reflected that staff are finding that working home makes it easier to manage their health and well-being, and particularly when people have sort of underlying conditions, they're finding those easier to manage from home. Taking you to the equalities information, this report includes data about our employees, which only shows minor variations from previous
think
there was an outage on Teams. It wasn't just our meeting. Good morning, Chairman.
Morning. We need to do another roll call, then I'll leave it up to you, Nigel.
Thank you. Nick, could you read out the names?
Yep. Councillor Adams. Councillor Adams. Councillor Mrs. Bowkett.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Brockway.
Present.
Councillor Kendrick.
Present.
Councillor Macy.
Present.
Councillor Marfleet.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Newton.
Present.
Councillor Pepper.
Present.
Councillor Strangle.
Present.
Councillor Wotton. Mrs. Machin.
Present.
Miss Sayer. Miss Sayer. Okay, thank you. Councillor Young. Councillor Young. Councillor Boothroyd. Councillor Boothroyd. Councillor Whittington.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Corey. Okay, that's it, Chairman. I think there's a few missing.
Thank you. Right, Lucy, back to your report. I think you were talking about your page 120 on days lost due to sickness, absence and reasons. I think that's where you were, but it's up to you. You pick up.
Okay, so I'd gone through most of the sickness absence. So just in summary on that mental health related absence has increased, but there are a number of different things in place to support staff at the moment. And also that our staff have told us in a recent survey that those working from home have found it therefore easier to manage sort of long-term health conditions that they might have. If I can go on therefore to the qualities information. So there have only been slight changes in the equalities data from previous reports. Though the COVID pandemic, we've been mindful of the increased risk to colleagues from Black and ethnic minority groups who account for just over 3% of our workforce. And we've put in additional risk assessments in place to help ensure their safety if they are required as part of their work to deliver frontline services. The next section of the report on 123 provides an update on the corporate workforce projects. So we've been re-looking at the employment. The HR team have been developing new and simplified employment policies, the launch of which has been delayed till January next year due to the pandemic. However, we are currently delivering managers training, which has been adjusted for remote delivery and is successfully running over Microsoft Teams to all managers across the council. I've included information about apprentices too. So we are continuing to develop apprenticeship opportunities in the council and have increased the target for staff undertaking apprenticeships in the current year. The emphasis will be on upskilling existing staff, recruiting new talent, so we can maximise the levy and benefit from staff development. We're also pleased to report that we have been able to maintain the learning for the majority of apprentices over the lockdown period. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's lovely. Because the report is divided into sections, what I propose to do is to go through it in sequence from page 118 onwards. Agency spend is usually a popular issue for debate. Does anybody want to raise anything about the increase in agency spend?
Chairman, all I've got is Councillor Jackie Brockway and myself to speak.
Okay, well, can one of you speak when it comes to the section that I'm going through? So yes. Voluntary turnover. Okay, move to page 120, and we've got days lost to sick absence.
Yeah, Chairman, I want to raise the on page 120 regarding the information that leavers provide. I mean, I was really pleased to see that the staff that left, there was a high percentage who had high regard for the council, even though they were leaving or left. But I wanted to know, are the percentage figures down there percentages of 160 leavers, or those who actually completed the exit survey, which was 16%?
So the information refers to those that completed the survey, so that's 16%.
So it's only 85% of 16%, which is not many.
So no, so that's correct. So the amount that completed the survey was that 16%, and you're correct that it was the 85% of that 16.
Right, okay. But I'm still pleased that people had a high regard of the council. But thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, my point is there as well, if I may. One of them is. On page 190, you mentioned that there are 106 voluntary leavers, and on page 120, it says 160 leavers voluntary and involuntary, which makes 54 involuntary. How many of those were dismissals, please?
I'll have to look back at the data just for a moment.
Thank you.
Dismissals for different reasons.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman. I will need to come back later with your permission. Thank you.
Okay, right. So carrying on, we've cleared days lost to sickness absence, equality data. Anything on page 122? I wanted to pick up bottom of 122 and 123. That the issues, it seems to be a marked increases in cases in relation to employee relations in the Police Directorate. And it then goes on to say the assistant directors across the Directorate are emphasising the importance of a performance culture. And as a consequence, there's been a spike in the number of cases. Could you say some more about the relationship as to why one follows from the other? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be the case.
So this was an area that we sort of noticed that there had been more cases being raised than had been previously. So this was the response that the Directorate provided. Therefore, I think there have been a number of changes in senior management within that area, and with that often comes a different approach. And within those areas, they decided that there was additional work that they needed to do to support the performance of staff in that area.
Okay, but that doesn't necessarily need to lead to formal disciplinary and grievance cases, does it? I just wondered what you can tell us that helps to reassure us that a sudden increase in formal disciplinary and grievance cases needs some explaining. Maybe we could arrange for something to be circulated to members outside of the meeting, but I do feel as though we perhaps need more than we've been given at the moment.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, corporate workforce update. That's page 1, 2, 3.
Yes, please, Chairman.
Certainly.
Oh, sorry.
I was calling you, Jackie Brockwood.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is an area that is concerning me enormously, actually, not about what it says, but about what it doesn't say. And this area actually affects councillors, and policies are being changed in a way that are going to affect councillors without consulting us. So at the moment, if an officer is dismissed, they've got a right of appeal to a panel of 3 councillors. We're praised nationally for this process. And the council's cases are very much, for the vast majority, robust. So decisions very rarely overturned, but occasionally they are. So it's a safety net for staff, wins us praise, and it's a very fair process. I understand that the changes in the HR policies include the removal of the right of some staff to go to council appeal. Is that right, please? And I have another question to follow that, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Lucy, can you take on board what Councillor Brockway is asking?
Yes, as part of the arrangements that there is a change in the process, and therefore the dismissal appeals would not go to members. But I believe the head of service, Fiona Thompson, would like to come in to mention more on that, if that's okay.
Certainly. Fiona.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So absolutely, what Lucy said is correct, and we engaged with councillors earlier on in the process, but there is still a right of appeal in certain cases, in exceptional cases, for staff, and obviously there's still a right of appeal for those chief officers where they are employed by members through the Appointments Committee, and any disciplinary issues would be dealt with by members. So it isn't absolutely black and white situation, but absolutely Councillor Brockway and Lucy are correct that in principle the right to appeal to members has been removed.
Chairman, may I come back, please?
You certainly can.
Right, I think this is a very serious thing, because this is actually interfering with the function of councillors without consulting councillors. A significant number of councillors who don't take part in this appeal are not going to be aware that this right is being removed. And this is actually the removal of a significant scrutiny function, because when we actually do these appeals, we frequently find failed processes, policies not followed. I mean, we also find a significant amount of very good work and very robust cases. So let's, put the praise in the right place. But I actually feel that removing a councillor function without consulting all councillors is a wrong thing to do. I think this should be removed from the HR policy. It should be put as a separate paper, and councillors should be properly consulted. I mean, removing it for some staff, exceptional circumstances, but chief staff can still have it. How is that going to look out there? I mean, at the moment, it is fair, it is robust, and it does give people a sense of attempt at justice. And very occasionally, an appeal is overturned, and that means that some innocent person retains their job. I feel very strongly about this, and Chairman, I would ask for your help in taking this forward, please. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Young, would you like to comment on this point made by Councillor Brockway at this stage?
The simple answer is no. I think the way forward probably is for a paper to be prepared for the next executive meeting, and having it referred or not, as the case may be, back for reconsideration.
Chair, the Chief Executive has indicated a wish to speak.
Okay. Debbie.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. This is an issue that we've had extensive discussions with the unions on. In terms of the right of appeal. I mean, Fiona will be able to give us the numbers, and I understand Councillor Brockway's anxiety about it. The numbers actually that go to an appeal, and then the numbers of cases that have been overturned at appeal are very, very, very small. Fiona does have the detail. Clearly, the individual does have a further right of challenge through an employment tribunal if they wished as well. And very much this issue we've benchmarked with other local authorities, and again Fiona will be able to give us the detail on that, in terms of it tends to be current practice across the vast majority of other local authorities as well. Fiona, I don't know if you're able to highlight some of the detail around that.
Well, can I just ask a question before Fiona comes back? What was the drive? You know, there's an old argument, isn't there, about the status quo is there. There's got to be an argument in favour of changing it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think one of the key issues was around the timetable. It can take it clearly protracts things out even longer and remains an individual to be in an uncertain position for longer. And again, Fiona will be able to give us the details of roughly the sort of time limits that it can take. But there was a real anxiety, I think, in terms of the extensive time that it takes in terms of extending the process.
Fiona, do you want to provide that detail that the Chief Exec is talking about?
Yes, yes, Chairman. I don't have it immediately to hand today, but what could I suggest that I pull that all together in the paper that we referred to, that we would submit back through the executive and through to the OSMB. I just don't have that very quickly at hand to be able to pull it together. But Debbie, absolutely, in terms of the key principle of the policy review was about streamlining processes, shortening processes, and certainly the consultation with the trade unions was very supportive of this change, of this particular change, because of that ability to be able to reduce down the process. So there is still a right of appeal, and the right of appeal will go to directors and assistant directors. So the right of appeal is absolutely still there, still in place.
So the position is that we are asking for a paper to go to the executive. Yes? Presumably that is the first time the executive will have seen it as an executive. Is that true?
I'm not sure. Fiona, can you help? Some of the policies have, I think, been shown, new policies.
Yes, that's correct. So a summary of the new policies have been shown that relate to the employee relations suite of policies. But the principle around the change to the elected member input into every appeal has been shared with the executive.
It has been?
Yes.
Okay.
Chairman, Councillor Brockway wants to come back in.
Okay, Councillor Brockway.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for the indulgence. Yes, I feel very strongly that changes of a councillor function in this way need to be communicated to councillors. And okay, if it's early stages, fair enough. But I'd like to know, please, when councillors are going to be advised that they're being removed from this process, which has proved to be significant. It may only be a low number. And can I tell you that some of the feedback that I've been given from unions is very different. The feedback is that they are very disappointed that Lincolnshire County Council has been regarded as a beacon because of this process. And it may be expensive, but the appeals are indeed very rare. You can go months and months and months without them. So it's not a big ask of the council. I really feel that we're being curmudgeonly here. There's something good and wholesome that is fair. We are removing councillors without asking us, and I see that you're gaining absolutely nothing other than a tiny bit of speed. And then councillors will lose the ability to pick up policy failures and process failures that haven't been picked up by officers. I'm sorry to be harsh there, but that is what we have found. And now I'll shut up. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. This is a serious issue, obviously. Not wanting to widen the debate particularly, but does anybody else want to make a contribution at this stage who've not spoken? Any indications, Councillor Wootton?
No, Chairman. No.
Okay, so
sorry, Councillor Parker. Sorry, Councillor. I just wanted to come back to Councillor Brockway. I mean, it's really just to reassure the committee. So we have gone through a formal engagement process with the unions, and whilst I respect the individual people who are representatives of the unions may clearly have shared their individual personal views with Councillor Brockway, and you know, I understand that. As a corporate body, I do just want to reassure the committee that the union are supportive of the change of policy, albeit individuals may have their personal views which they may have shared, but as a corporate body, the unions have signed up and are supportive.
Sure, I hear that, and I hear what Councillor Brockway said. At the moment, though, we're in a situation where a custom and practice has been changed without explanation out there in what we might call the open, and I'm seeking to remedy that so that we do, as a council collectively, take a decision that is recorded. So the suggestion and recommendation was that a paper goes to the executive for ratification. Yep. Now, there we have, I'm not saying an answer, a compromise, but we have an answer that it will now be on record, together with the consultation that has taken place. Okay. We'll pause there for the moment, but and I'll come back to that when we look at the recommendation. So would you like to go on, Lucy, or have you finished?
I've finished, but if there are any other questions.
Okay. So any more questions that anybody wants to raise or points they want to make about the HR Management Information Report?
Chairman, I've got Councillor Rob Kendrick wishes to speak.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just wondering, as regards the point made about people working from home and have disabilities and I guess mental health issues as well, whether that will sort of bring a policy change as regards working practices. Will there be sort of more consideration given to people working at home because they have certain conditions or disabilities as regard when we've finished with hopefully seeing the back of the COVID crisis? I just wonder whether that's going forward, whether there will be a slight change to working practices where people who experience these problems will be working from home or permitted to work from home. I know it's a bit of a sort of finger in the air guessing type of thing, but I was just wondering whether there's any thought being given to that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Lucy or Fiona, yeah.
So working from home going forward outside of the pandemic will be basically to do with the work that individuals need to complete. Where there are circumstances that people can do work from home, then that may be something that can be taken forward. And of course, we'd always take into account people's circumstances and ensure that they're working in an environment which is supportive to their personal health. However, if those individuals are required to do frontline work, then that makes it a little more difficult.
Thank you. Is that okay, Rob?
Thanks very much, Chairman. Thank you.
That's fine. Anybody else want to raise anything?
No further speakers, Chairman.
Okay, well, our actions required...
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. Chief Executive's got a hand up.
Fine.
Sorry, but thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Parker. I wanted to come back on the point that you made earlier to the committee around the cost of agency workers and the cost of agency increasing. The corporate leadership team had this report and discussed this report and identified the issue of increase in agency spend and asked for some further work to be done on it so that we understood why there was an increase in terms of agency. That work has now been completed. I think it's fair to say that it hasn't revealed anything that we didn't already know, so that is positive. We do know that agency spend in social workers across children and adults remains an area of focus for us, and there's a lot of focused work going on to try and reduce that. We know as well that there is a particular challenge at the moment with regard to education psychology, and again we're working with our health organisations to look at finding a more permanent solution to that. And we also know that the cost of our residential agency spend is also going up. So reassuring that we know about the issues and that there is a plan to address all of those areas of increased spend. Obviously, depending on how quick we can put in some of the plans that we've got around particularly those three areas, then we would begin to see then a downturn in that spend. But there has been some delay in terms of implementing the recommendations and some of the action plans, particularly with regard to the educational psychology, because the health organisation that we're working with obviously has prioritised their area of focus around the coronavirus challenges that they've got, and that's led to some delay in our plans. But just to reassure the committee that we are aware of it and do have plans to try and reduce that spend.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else wish to speak?
Nobody else, Chairman, registered.
Thank you. So we have sought assurances on a number of issues in relation to the paper that we've got before us. In one area, though, I think that we are being asked to agree as a Pwlb Scrutiny Management Board that a report on changes to the HR practices relating to council involvement in disciplinary procedures be submitted to the executive. Okay. So what I'm capturing from the discussion led by Jackie was that a report on changes to the HR practices relating to council involvement and disciplinary procedures be submitted to the executive. So is that the sort of thing that you're happy with, Jackie? For us to decide
yes,
on?
Chairman. I think I'd like you to emphasise that there has been consultation, but councillors haven't been consulted, and this affects councillors' scrutiny function in a very sensitive area. So I'd like thank you very much, Chairman.
Okay. Okay. So that can be part of the report. Sorry, the paper that we ask the executive to do something about. Are people clear about what we're voting on? Anybody not?
Yes.
Okay. So could we have a show of hands for those in favour of that a report be submitted to the executive? Okay, who's counting?
Chairman, I can't see all the hands because everybody's not put their video link on. Chairman, I can only see 4 hands for, and that might be because not everybody has put their video on.
Okay, well, let's see how we do with that's in favour. So those who don't favour that approach, could you indicate, please?
Chairman, it's Tracy here. I could see 12 hands up earlier indicating in favour.
Sorry, could you say that again, Tracy, please?
Yeah, I could see 12 hands up earlier indicating in favour of the report being actions required.
Okay.
So with the large gallery again.
Right. So do we feel as though everybody's had the chance to vote? I'm asking that directly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah.
So that proposal has been voted upon in favour. So we can arrange therefore through Democratic Services for such a request to go to the executive on behalf of all of OSMB.
Yes, we're arranged that, Chairman.
Yep. Sorry, did you speak, Tracy?
Sorry, yes, I just say we'll arrange that for you, Chairman.
Thank you. That's lovely. Okay. Fine. Thank you, Lucy and Fiona, for the presentation. Lovely. If we can move to item 11 on the agenda, which is a Treasury Management Performance. Quarter one, Karen Tong. Yep.
Yep. Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you. And I'm Karen Tong, Treasury Manager for Council. And this is my Treasury Management Update report for quarter one that takes into account activity to the 30th of June this year. It compares this activity to the strategy for 2021 that was approved back in March of this year. As usual, I've broken the report down into 4 key areas that of interest, economy, investments, borrowing, and any other issues. So I'll just pick out the key points in each of these areas today, starting with the interest rate. The strategy predicted that there'd be a moderate increase in both short-term and long-term rates, no more than really 1% for over the next 3 years, probably 0.25% in 2021. This strategy was set obviously before the impact of the pandemic took hold, and it also assumed that we'd have an agreement with the Brexit withdrawal deal. So if you look at Appendix A on page 137 of the report, you'll see the graph there happened to interest rates in the quarter, and you'll see that both long and short-term rates have remained relatively flat over this time. Base rate was cut to 0.1% in March and has remained at this level since. And long-term rates sort of fell in March by about 1% and have roughly remained in that general ballpark area. The forecast on that appendix from Link, our Treasury Management Advisors, shows that these levels of rates are going to be with us for a considerable period to come. The economy, the measures to tackle the COVID pandemic by the government from March onwards sent big shocks, as we'd expect. GDP was predicted to fall by 28% initially. That's been revised to 23% now since the measures. Unemployment sort of predicted to fall to 7.5% from initially thinking that it's going to be 9%. The recovery expected is not going to be a V shape. We're not going to bounce right back, is the general thinking. It's going to maybe take us a long time to get back to where we were pre-COVID measures. Some predictions have been sort of perhaps this will be the beginning of 2023, given we may if we get a vaccine, I should say. So it's going to be a long way back to where we actually were before this took hold. So that's ignoring any increases we were expecting as well. Moving on to investments. The strategy for our investments, as you know, is priority, security and liquidity in that order. Security, liquidity and yield, should I say, in that order. And we have a low risk counterparty strategy to achieve this priority. We can lend a maximum of up to 2 years to suit direction of interest rates at the time. The Appendix B on page 143 of the report shows the investment activity for the quarter and the performance. So you'll see that at the end of June, our investment level was 306 million. This is increased over the quarter as we've received significant funding from government to tackle COVID measures, but this is still yet to be expended fully from us. So that this is giving us higher interest balances, cash balances. The investment return for the quarter was 0.773%. This is beating falling LIBOR benchmarks quite significantly, as you'll see. We're also beating comparator benchmarks in benchmark clubs, and again, this is primarily due to our longer weighted average maturity of investments of 128 days. So this is obviously locking into our existing higher rate investments at a time when benchmark rates are falling. As eventually these investments will mature, we are on a falling investment pattern in the future. For an example, today's yield is already 0.51. It's dropped from that 0.77 already. The investment yield is falling because rates are falling, as you'll see, and also because we're having to hold more investments in liquid investments, which yield the lowest amount. And that's mainly because due to uncertainty of timing of cash flows at the moment, and not know when amounts will be wanted to leave us. So that's having an impact as well on low investment returns, and this is, like I say, is going to continue for a considerable time in the future. At present, there's been no changes in investment strategy or our risk appetite, and there's been no breaches in limits. And you can see our lending list on Appendix C, page 145, and you can also see our list of investments held at of June on page 149 for your information. So moving on to borrowing. Strategy in March showed that external debt was just over 500 million at the start of the year at a cost of 3.757%. Our borrowing requirement set for the year was 137.9 million. And my aim in the strategy was to reduce this cost of debt and maintain an even debt maturing profile. So that's the strategy. Appendix E on page 161 shows the activity for the quarter on borrowing, and you'll see that we haven't taken any external borrowing to date as yet. The borrowing requirement has been revised down also to 74 million from 137.8 already, and that's due to carry forward changes, rephasing, forecasted underspend, etc. So we haven't taken any borrowing yet, as I say, and there's several factors for this. Mainly, the interest rate forecast is flat for borrowing rates, as you've seen, so we've got no pressure to do anything there. There's further rephasing expected. In fact, from that 74 million, it's already dropped to 59, and I'm expected to recalculate that a couple more times shortly as well. So the amount of borrowing that we need to take is changing as well. We're awaiting the outcome of a Pwlb consultation. So the borrowing rates that we can secure from Pwlb may fall. So we don't want to do anything until the outcome of that. And there's also because investment returns are so low, that there's also an argument to increase the amount of internal borrowing we do, which is actually not borrowing externally, but using our cash to finance the capital programme instead, which will reduce the cash balances of the council at a time when we're not earning any money on those. So there's that argument as well. So those go to the reason why we haven't taken any external borrowing yet this year. No temporary borrowing or debt rescheduling or breaches in prudential indicators were done in the quarter either. So, and then just a couple of other issues I want to sort of point out. As I said, there's been a Treasury consultation on the Pwlb margins and lending that concluded at the end of July. This may mean that Pwlb, well, you might remember that I've already mentioned in prior meetings that the Pwlb increased their rates across the board by 1% in October. And the results of this consultation may mean that increase comes down again. We're expecting, but that's commercial lending, which we haven't got any of at the moment. So we are expecting a fall. We don't know when the results of that consultation will be, but we're thinking it might be in December, along with the finance settlement from government. Although I do note today that the autumn budget has just been cancelled by government. So the priority for that might shift for the government while they're concentrating on other things. So and the other thing to mention, I'm pleased to note that we've received high assurance for Treasury management function and investment strategy by our internal audit recently. And this audit was done that covers our operations and procedures whilst at home. So that really was an endorsement that those sort of arrangements are working effectively for Treasury. So that's really all I wanted to pick out from my report, and I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Another very sound report, and thank you for the work that you do. I'm sure I speak for everybody that your work is much appreciated. Councillor Wotton, anybody put forward a name for questions?
None so far, Chairman.
Okay. How would you, to help us think about the future, what would you say from your understanding of very changing times is likely to be your next report for Q2?
Well, obviously the two big things that are affecting the economy or may affect the economy going forward are the pandemic measures and also the Brexit issue, which has sort of been put on a back burner, really, taken less precedence in the news, certainly. I can see interest rates, as I say, are going to stay low for a long time. Because the government are keeping these low to protect people, protect jobs and businesses and so forth. So we can certainly see a very low interest return going forward. There hasn't been any expectation of negative interest rates from the MPC, although there have been murmurs that they're looking at whether this will achieve anything worthwhile for their, in their measures to tackle the problems. So interest, the interest revenue is going to be low for a long time, but it may even become an expense area. It may cost us to hold money going forward in the future. Who knows? But I don't think myself will have negative interest rates. I hope not. But it's something else to bear in mind. On the flip side, though, long-term borrowing rates are going to be low for a long time as well. So we'll be able to borrow cheaper going forward. What else? On the on the GDP side, on the economy side, some economists I've recently listened to from HSBC, that they seem to think that the economy will drop by 10% in 2020 overall. In the end, recover by 6% the year after. You know, we'll still be down on that in a couple of years' time to what we were started at before. So the economy is going to suffer, and there'll be a slow recovery. Is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
So, and with Brexit, I don't know. The pandemic has sort of maybe reduced the economic fallout from a no-deal Brexit because there's not as much activity going on in the economy at the moment. But then again, governments aren't prepared for a no-deal Brexit either. So there's you know, it can affect both ways. I have heard reports that if we don't have an agreement by the end of the year on Brexit, then it could impact GDP by about 1%, 3% is economists' predictions, and make the recovery even slower. It will obviously increase costs, just due to increased admin alone and tariffs that may arise. And inflation will be affected and so forth. But it's worth bearing in mind, if we don't get an agreement at the end of the year, it's not the end of the story. It just means that things will be delayed. You know, we won't stop talking to Europe, or you know, we will still be talking, and this thing will get sorted out eventually. It's just a delay. So that's my predictions. For next quarter: low investment return, cheaper borrowing, and the economy taking a hit, and a slow recovery.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Anybody want to ask anything more about the report that Karen just presented for Treasury Management Quarter 1? No. Okay. So I think what we're voting on is that we note, okay, the report. Any comments be passed on to the executive? I'm sure that Tracy's captured some of the things that were said by Karen, particularly in relation to not just this report but the future, and we'll pass those on to the executive. So, do we agree to note the report? That's what I'm asking you to vote on, and for the comments that have been made by Karen in answer to my question about the future. Can we agree and have a vote? That's what we're going to do. Those in favour? Those against? Can we have the score, please, from somebody?
That's carried, Chairman.
Unanimous in favour. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you once again. And then finally, the last item on the agenda, which is to do with our work, only for information. Okay, just bringing it to people's attention. This is the current work programme of the board for 2021, and just looking to our next meeting, which is on the 29th of October. We've got a COVID-19 recovery update, transformation programme with Andrew McLean, medium-term financial strategy, corporate support services contract performance, and that's it. So, I'm going to thank you for your attendance, and look forward to meeting you sometime before then, but if not, at the end of October. Thanks to all the officers for their contribution as well. Thanks. Declare the meeting closed.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman.